Hey guys, welcome to Faz Radio. Let's get into it.
I could start in a dozen different ways on this topic of the banking system versus crypto, and the sentiment that I've been seeing a lot lately, both on Twitter and in personal conversations, and with the legislation that just went through on this crypto bill that was tucked into the Infrastructure Act. A lot of it seems to be panic from the banking side because they have to find a way to keep themselves relevant. And the problem with that is that a lot of people are starting to realize that, well, they get into crypto, that is, are starting to realize, well, how is it that Gemini or BlockFi or Nexo or any of these companies out there can offer me this ridiculous, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12% on the stable coins that I put in there, but the banks can't. And we could go down the rabbit hole on the whys behind the whys with the overnight loans and all that. But really what it boils down to is these banks are going to have to find a way to compete as crypto becomes more and more part of everyday society. And I'm not sure how they're going to approach it. And I'm not sure that staying relevant is in their best interest. So what I mean by that is I think they should consider surrendering to crypto early.
I agree.
Now that's not something they're obviously going to do. They have an incredibly powerful lobby in DC, and they will fight it tooth and nail because banks, what a lot of people don't realize about banks is they are just a intermediary party, meaning they don't own their checking accounts and savings accounts. They don't keep your money physically at that bank. It's kind of an illusion, right? The way that the banking system works.
Yes, banks are trying to keep themselves relevant, in my opinion, because the way that they have worked with money in the past is they were simply allowed by the feds to simply invent money. They can simply, the very fact of creating a loan creates money. And that's hard to believe, but it's true. If I loan you $1,000, that $1,000 has to exist when I loan it to you. When a bank loans $1,000, that $1,000 does not have to exist. So they've effectively created money. What people keep forgetting about is after the loan is paid off, that imaginary $1,000 doesn't exist anymore. The original money that was loaned out, it was never there to begin with, so it disappears in a puff of logic. And so then you have the $1,000 of repayment of the loan, or the $1,050 repayment of the loan, and that's the real money. And now they're having to switch from this magical loan creation system to all the weird methods that, say, Nexo and BlockFi uses, and they have no idea how that works, because it's easier to just invent money and loan it out. Just, here you go. It's not easy to actually track all the shit through all of its various things.
I think we started this horribly because we both kind of went in different directions. I jumped right into it. You gave a backstory. So now I have to back up. So a different method, I think, is a good starting point for understanding why the banks won't be able to compete, at least head to head. They might be able to compete with some of the traditional people out there who rely on that banking and trust in that banking system that they've been using for 50, 60 years of their lives. There's still people out there that use checks. physical checks and don't do online banking. They go see a teller when they're available, because a lot of banks don't even have tellers available. A lot of what I've been seeing on Twitter and in personal conversations that I've been having over the last couple of weeks revolves around medicine, around the government, around the infrastructure bill, specifically on the side of banking, where people are deciding that enough's enough with being taken advantage of from the banks with fees and loans. And they're getting into crypto, and they're realizing that companies like Nexo and BlockFi and some of the others, Gemini even, are offering a tremendous return for stable coins, which is equivalent to the dollar. And they're wondering why it is that their system that they use at whatever bank they bank at doesn't do the same. And they're also realizing it's happened in England already, where I think it was Barclays Bank stopped anyone from depositing their money into Binance or some of the other crypto companies. They wouldn't allow you to transfer money from your checking account into a crypto exchange. It's gotten to the point now, an article was just out last week, that's starting to happen other places as well. There's a company out there that is Compass Mining, and they had their accounts through Chase Bank. And Chase Bank suddenly shut them down because they were accepting money from people to put it into the crypto world. And people are getting pretty aggravated at this. These banks are trying to preserve their existence in this revolution of crypto by trying to just cut off the flow of money. And people are starting to realize what a scam that is. And I think this is going to bring about a fairly large change in the attitude people have towards the traditional banking system. People are standing up for themselves with the banking. People are starting to get up at school board meetings. And there was one I put in the Discord about San Diego turned into a near riot at the school board meeting about the vaccine mandates and the COVID protocols that were going on.
Let's stay away from politics too much. I get what you're saying.
Right. I just want to set the basis because of the statement I'm about to make. We also have people who stood up for this infrastructure bill, and you and I argued about the voice of the people and how effective that would be. I will take 2 steps backwards on that one and not fully acquiesce that it was the people who stopped it, but the collective of both the people and the people with the big money who poked at them enough to get them to stop what they were doing. My point of all of this conversation, my long-winded prelude, is that over the course of the last decade or so, people have not vocalized or stood up for what they believe is the right thing. And suddenly, this storm of COVID, of politics, of crypto has suddenly, and I hate using the term, it's so cliche, woke people up to how badly they're getting screwed over, or at least their appearance of being screwed over, whatever they take that to be, and are finally starting to vocalize about this. And the discussion I wanted to have today was the pros and cons of that and how that can both help and hurt the cause for bringing crypto more mainstream every day.
As usual, you have a lot of stuff to unpack there, but I want to stay with, I think, your stated intent here. So first things first, the cutting of the flow of money from banks isn't new, obviously. It's one of the things that kept me out of crypto originally. And strangely, it's something that has caused people to want crypto even more, because they realize that they thought that they're going to have to just create an alternate system and just use only that system. So I got into crypto because I thought, well, as long as the banks will let me, I'll get crypto. And then by the time they illegalize it, I'll have enough crypto to be able to spend without needing to change it into fiat. People worry a lot more about the on ramps and off ramps nowadays, but in the past they didn't as much, because it was like, let's just make the purchase and then we'd be fine. But yes, I totally agree with you on the need to figure that out. How can that help and hurt the cause for bringing crypto? Well, nothing happens in a vacuum. It's not going to be like when we had this legislation happen, people spoke up. And I know you've stated before that politicians do what politicians do, and they ignore what we say. And I'm glad to hear that you admit that they do actually listen to what we say. The reason that they listen to what we say, frankly, even from a pessimistic point of view, is they need to know, who to pay off. They need to know the direction that society wants to go, and it's becoming apparent that society wants to go in the direction of crypto. What it appears to me that the federal government has been totally taken aback by all this. They're completely surprised. Yeah, they knew about it in 2014, and so the IRS expanded some of their reporting rules to say that crypto was property. But the federal government has never taken it seriously until very, very recently. And they'll take it more seriously the more companies and the more money that gets into it. Now it's like almost $1 trillion, I think, into crypto. They're starting to take it really seriously. And the reason they're taking it seriously is because they can make tax money from it. They can tax it. That's, I think, what the federal government wants to do is tax it. So I think the federal government will eventually get on board. But of course, they also have other needs, which is they want to make sure that they protect people, because rightfully so, they're concerned that people may be scammed. That's not a bad idea. How they want to do it seems to be the problem. What's worse is they don't even know how they're going to do it. They're just assuming that they're going to be doing it in a very, very overt, oppressive regulation type of way, which is, hey, we're going to tell you what to do and you're going to do it. And I think government has to change. I think they're continuing to be, and they are. I think that they're surprised by this, and they're continuing to be surprised at how crypto actually works, and they will continue to be surprised as to how they can and can't tax it. Now, it just so happens with fiat, a common way is to tax the companies. Sales tax is collected through companies. It's not collected through the individuals. Once you pay for something, the company just takes the extra money and then pays that tax. They can try that with crypto, and that may work. I think they're worried about how we accumulate and invest, because that's what we're doing right now. Since we're not buying products very much with it, it's hard to get sales tax from it. It's after all, the government doesn't get sales tax between me and you. If I were to buy $1,000 desk off of you, they wouldn't get that sales tax, even though I'm supposed to report it. There'd be no record of the transaction, and it'd be hard for them to figure it out. With cars, it's a lot easier because cars are regulated. They have titles, and they have laws around those things. So they can probably tax you in depending on what we buy and sell to each other. Unfortunately, because everything is recorded on a blockchain, they have the ability of taxing you for even a 5-cent candy that I might buy from you. And that's going to be onerous. We're not used to that. As far as how banks relate to all this, they don't know how. It's a totally new way of doing things. They're going to have to open up a new department in the bank to deal with actually making their numbers balance. You have to make your numbers balance with a limited crypto, or else you're going to lose track, and then you're going to be in the wrong. And everybody's watching. Everybody's going to be able to tell if you messed up with your numbers. So that's a challenge. Going from an inaccurate system to an accurate system is probably the largest change society has ever had to deal with since the advent of keeping books, because at least you could cook books. You can't cook a blockchain.
That's a fantastic outlook on that. You gave some really good examples. I think though that you're going to have a problem trying to regulate a blockchain, especially if it's going to require, let's say, sales tax to come out automatically. They can code a CDBC to automatically take out sales tax. They can code it to automatically remove your Social Security and Medicare when you get your paycheck. So on the quote fiat side of it, using a CDBC, they can put all that in there. They can't do that to EOS. They can't do that to Holochain. They can't do that to Bitcoin. They can't. Well, with Ethereum, they probably could. They can get in there. That's probably the most centralized of them all, and they could probably exert some pressure and some force there. I'm not sure the people would tolerate that, though. And I think that the technology, because, as you mentioned, the government's so far behind on taking this seriously, that by the time it would take them to get a law in place, the developers would then already have found a solution on how to avoid that and have it up and running. So I think at this point, the biggest gaffe that the government made was not getting ahead of this and taking it seriously earlier, as you mentioned. They're going to, ironically, they'll pay for it in the long run by not being able to be involved in the creation of it. And that's going to hamper them down the road. I think that once people understand more about how blockchain works and how cryptocurrency works, it's only going to get worse, because people will realize, A, this can't be stopped. There's nothing they can do. They can regulate an on-ramp and an off-ramp, but that's about it. And they have to make it kind of like I was saying about the banks. They have to just throw their hands up and say, okay, you win. However, let's make this reasonable. And there are ways to make it reasonable, and there are ways to make it attractive. The problem is at that highest level, in that he who controls the banking system and or the money has all the power. And I think that's going to be the problem that they're going to struggle with the most from a government level, is losing the power over people and their money.
Yeah.
And people aren't going to tolerate that old system the more that they get involved in this, the way that crypto works. And I was a skeptic for years. You had been talking to me about it for a number of years. And I can understand where it comes from, because that was my argument, is, hey, the government is never going to allow anybody to compete with their money. And you kept saying, oh, well, they can't. And I'm like, you're full of it. There's no way. And I never bothered to take that next step and learn they can't. So I think that's where a lot of people are right now. There's a lot of FOMO building because they see on the news and talking to people about how much appreciation they've had with their crypto assets, and they can't avoid it in any of the media anymore. But they still are holding out because they still think it's fake. They're waiting for their government to come out and regulate it and either push it out of existence or whatever the case may be. Maybe they're scared because they have accumulated $1 million of fiat, and they're afraid it'll go away, and then they're going to be left with these coins that they don't understand. There's so much around that. But the people who do take a proactive approach to it and learn about it realize that it is a far superior form of money, of savings, of storing that value. And they're standing up for it now. They're not tolerating it. Before, people would just throw their hands up. 10 years ago, people just throw their hands up. Okay, well, that's the rules. Nothing we can do about it. You won't let me move my money. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
And now people are going, no, that's my money. I can spend it how I want. You can't tell me how to spend my money.
So, okay, so I think there's a difference there, and I think it really depends upon whether you've made money with crypto or not. If you've made, I would say the more money you've made in any given area, the more of that attitude you have. Rich people don't like being told what to do with their money, and they constantly find ways to move their money into different areas to make more money. Poor people want privacy. They want to be able to blow their money if they want to. Rich people want to be able to invest their money as they want to. They always want to get more. Usually you become rich because you've come up with a way of getting more and more money. So this is, I think, a rare circumstance where you're finding rich people and poor people actually agreeing on the same thing, which is leave my money alone. Poor people, once they actually learn how the banks invent money, loan it out, and then get more money back, if they really get it, they get really pissed. But because you're poor, when you're usually getting shafted when you're poor. So you're just like, that's just another area where the federal government is screwing me. Or that's just another area where the system is screwing me if they like the federal government. And I really think this was started, kind of a grassroots thing was started by, Bitcoin was started by some very smart people. But I think this has gained traction by a lot of poor people who have, or poorer smart people who have mined Bitcoins a long time ago. And then those people started coming up with ways of making more money. And now they are the rich people. And they're still trying to propagate this idea. And they're getting more and more people to join them because I see it as almost a zeitgeist. Everything's coming together of people in different areas starting to realize that they're tired of the old system of the feds telling us what to do. It used to be, I think I mentioned this in other podcasts, it used to be in the past, we had our banking systems would fail every 20 years. In the 1800s, if you do your history, you'll find out that the banking systems always failed every 20 or 30 years. Why? Because they would mismanage their money. They would try to print up money that they didn't have. Things would get out of control. The money would crash. And then, a lot of it was, what bank were you using? And they even had, for a time, banks even had their own notes. If you go even further back into history, into the 1600s and stuff like that, they had all sorts of chaos like that where people would print up notes and sell notes. Crypto is really not much of a difference. But back then, those systems fell apart because the people who ran those systems inevitably mismanaged them. They had more demand than they could provide, so they started subdividing those notes, or they started changing. They'd print more notes and then devalue the notes because that was the only way that their system could keep working. And so I think crypto is actually a return to that kind of idea. but now somebody's keeping score. The blockchain is keeping score. The good news is with something like Ethereum, an inflationary asset, you can make, well, there's no mistakes that can be made with the blockchain, but with an inflationary asset, you could at least take advantage of being able to provide more liquidity. With the deflationary blockchains, or the ones that will not increase, there are different challenges. I see with all these cryptos several different ways being made to do this, to manage the token. I think that's a really cool and creative thing. I see all these different things that are being explored that were never able to be explored in the past. Cryptos with really weird ways of doing their tokenomics. Some that will, constantly reward their holders. The longer you hold, staking and stuff like that. Some that give you value when you give value in a certain way. Those are really cool ideas. The rich people seem to think that all these ways are going to be explored, and there's going to be about one or two winners, or a few winners, and they want to be able to invest in the winners because they'll make the most money. I kind of think that they're all in a way going to be winners, and that things aren't really going to settle out for a long time, like 50 years. I think a lot of crazy coins are going to be around for a long, long time. I think it's going to be a really big, rich ecosystem, and there'll be bastions in different areas. But of course, we all know what happened with the internet. The internet, everybody was on the same foot, and then Yahoo and Google gained prominence. Yahoo went away, and then now we just have Google. And every once in a while we'll switch things out. Maybe Microsoft will be ahead for a while. I don't know. Is there somebody that's ahead now with internet? I haven't been keeping much track lately.
Nor have I. My head's been 110% into crypto, so I've not followed the internet or fantastic new things other than the Web3. I'm digging into the Web3. I bump into new things there all the time. It wasn't meant to be a long discussion, but I just thought I wanted to shed some more awareness that for those of us who are passionate about crypto, I wanted to get out there. The momentum is spreading. There are people who not only in crypto, but in other facets of life are also standing up and being heard for the transgressions they feel that are being put on them that aren't fair anymore. We do have more power than we realize, and I think we need to do it responsibly. If you do like I do a lot and just get your blood pressure raised and shout and holler, it doesn't get very far. But when you put a coordinated effort into getting something out there to people, which this platform is wonderful for doing. It makes people think. That's what I hope. I'm not trying to tell people how to think from this microphone. I just want people to think about some of these things and think how they can support the things they believe in their way, and understand that now they're not alone so much anymore. There's a group of people that is growing every day and will be able to help support those same feelings.
I'm happy to talk about politics, but only as a backdrop of what we're talking about. My opinions on and your opinions on the local, on the current political issue of the day, to me, distracts away from the crypto. But if you say this local political thing that happens during the day is complicating crypto, I want to hear about how it might complicate crypto. But we've got to stay with the facts that both of us understand, or else we're just going to argue about the reasons.
Right. Well, that brings out a lot of different opinions too, because with the way that people are approaching crypto, opens up the can of worms into other areas of politics. We have these lousy bills coming up for the crypto, And immediately when you read it, you go, oh my God, they have no idea what they're talking about. That's blatantly obvious by the
yeah,
way that
and
they did this. But then it goes, people always take that another step and they go, well, they do that with crypto. They probably did that with this bill and that bill and created this law without
yes and
realizing.
no.
So then it turns into a whole big political nightmare.
Yes and no. I mean, remember, a lot of the people that get elected to office are lawyers, and they're lawyers because they're able to hear a set of facts and ascertain what's legal, what's not, and come up with good arguments for either side. So I'm confident in the fact that they're fairly educated people that have the ability to understand. However, they may not care. This whole things have been getting a lot more political lately, and people have been our representatives and senators have been spending more time caring about serving their constituents, whoever they may be, and less about learning and actually running the country. That they will hold things up for weeks and weeks and years on whatever side because of some political reason. Who gives a fuck? Just run the fucking country. And crypto in Congress, that's really about running the country. Making things political means you're going to be stopping it from happening. That's why we shouldn't be arguing about behind the reasons for politics. We should be arguing instead about the best way to get crypto be understood by senators and representatives, by the people running this country. Who cares the reason?
Well, that's one of my big arguments, and it's your fault. You caused me to think this way. And I mean that sincerely, because you're the one who opened my eyes all those years ago, 2007 or whatever it was, when you had me watch that Zeitgeist online movie. And one of the things that has always stuck with me with that when it relates to stuff like this is they talked about having the lawyers up in DC, and he had mentioned, lawyers aren't problem solvers. Engineers are problem solvers. So if you want to solve problems, you elect engineers to the House of Representatives and the Senate, not lawyers. And I think we need more of that, which then opens up the can of worms of qualifications and everything else, which I don't want to get into. I'm not talking about that.
No,
but
I'd like to comment here. The problem with electing engineers, and I am an engineer myself in a way. I'm not a complete licensed engineer, but I'm a software engineer. The problem with electing engineers they know how to solve problems, but they don't make you feel good. There's a cartoon meme out there that shows that shows two lines. One is a line toward inconvenient truths, and the other one is to facts that we like, or comforting lies. And engineers aren't going to tell you comforting lies, but our politicians do that all the time. That's why you elect them. You elect them because you know that they have your back. If an engineer comes in and says we're fucked unless we do that, who's going to elect that guy?
That's the problem. You should. We need more see, now you just raised my blood pressure. I think that's your goal on every one of these, is to raise my blood pressure.
That's how we get people. That's how we get listeners.
We need reality in our lives. I don't want to hear comforting bullshit. I want to hear how it is. And if it's bad news, it's bad news. But then that's where we rely on them and say, okay, so how do this is a really crappy thing that you're telling me. So how do we solve that? And then we let them solve that. What's happening with lawyers is they're just throwing some stupid law out there, which is why we have 15 layers and 3.5 or 7.5, I can't remember what it was, inches of a tax code. They just throw crap out there to gloss over a problem. The problem still exists, but now there's a law that kind of sort of addresses it, but it's never in the favor of the people. It's always on the favor of the government. And that's where this crypto stuff really incenses me. They, instead of solving the problem and working with crypto experts, they didn't do that. They just slapped a solution on it and said, we're just going to shut this down by doing this, this, and this. And there, problem solved. Well, no, that's not a solution. That might be a solution to the problem of talking about it and fixing it, but it's not a solution to the actual issue, which is where that's where I draw my line in the sand and say, we need problem solvers there, not lawyers.
If you're going to have an engineer or a problem solver in Congress, they need to be well spoken. Lawyers tend to be very well spoken, no matter how they believe. And that's why they're ahead. It's because, frankly, we elect the same politicians that we elect as class president in high school. We're electing them because they're pretty, or because they're nice, because they act like us, because they talk like us, whatever. We're not actually trying to solve the problem. So until you get people wanting to solve the problem, this isn't going to change. In the meantime, those that actually do solve the problem, they're going to be getting ahead. And so the thing about crypto, and the reason you can't ignore it, is if ignore it at your peril. This is a worldwide thing, and the world is going to move past your silly little country, and I don't care what country you have, if you choose not to do anything about it. That's why we're starting to pay attention a little bit more.
And the approach, I think, is the same way. We need to approach it with the lawmakers in a civilized manner. Just screaming and hollering that this is the wrong move is pointless. So we have to work with them to do it. But again, it appears that these lawmakers are not willing to work with the experts. They're simply trying to get their advice from Treasury or from the SEC on how to solve the problem. And that's only one side of it, and it's not the side of the people. So that's what's, I think, inflaming the issue even more, is you've got to go to the experts. I mean, I get when I go look for advice on crypto or want to research a project, I don't go to the person pumping whatever coin in the Binance thread about what should be listed next. I go to a crypto thinkers group, which is people who are deeply immersed, either running their own projects, previously ran their own projects, and I gather their opinions on how to approach not only research, but interpreting things. And that's what I believe Washington needs to do. They got to be pulling those people up there and saying, okay, here's what we want. And you do this with me all the time. They got to do it the Faz way. The lawmakers need to sit down with these people and go, okay, here's the problem that we have. Here's the problem that you have. How do we find a happy medium to this?
Well,
so that both of us are happy.
That would be nice, but I mean, we could speculate all day about the right ways that they can do things. I don't think that's going to work very well for them. I think it would be probably more practical, as you might recall from an earlier conversation, is to worry about how we can do things with the army we have rather than the army we don't. And so we need to find out what works with our current situation with governance of money, laws, and crypto, and find out the best way to get that, work with that system. Then
but you have to change the system. You can't just keep operating in an obsolete system and acquiesce. Well, this is the army we have. Oh, well, we've got these
get your foot in the door.
elected officials up there. We just need to deal with it because that's what we've got.
No. Crypto has this. You got to get your foot in the door. The way to change the system is to get your foot in the door, and crypto has its foot in the door. And I think we need to find ways to increase that foothold. I think we're on the path, the right path of doing things better, but it's going to have to be a lot of grunt work still of talking to your representatives and senators. That part's not going to go away. I mean, you can start building things until they don't understand. I think our Discord is a good way to spread some education around. Spreading education is how is a way that we can do something.
Well, how do we get Washington to start listening to our podcast and some of the others out there that make sense then?
Get popular enough to where the mainstream media will follow us.
People are getting pretty aggravated with the state of a lot of ways that local governments, state governments, and federal governments are approaching things with people. They're used to that power in a lot of ways. It used to be that if the government said, nope, we're not doing crypto, well, then people would just roll right over and be like, okay. And the days of that are over, I think. And it's really putting the governments in the position to double down and push harder and reassert their authority. I hope they understand, meaning the government, understand that it's not some type of coup that we're trying to create, but it's getting back to the roots of what this country was founded on, and it's the power of the people. And this is what the people want. So now your job is to sell that to the government, not having you try and sell us what you think is best.
Right. I think we're getting way more political than I'd like. But you're riding the edge. So I think I want to end it at this point.
Terrific.
I think we'll do better next week. But all in all, I think we had some good stuff said here. So I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.